Okay. So as mentioned before, it's kind of fitting that inertia is the first location factor because I think we can all see it, whether you're wherever you are, Philippines, Australia, America. It's hard for sort of stable companies to locate out because they already have their consumers, they already have their workers there, and also the combination of being profit oriented, meaning they want to make profits, and risk averse, meaning they don't want to take any risk, really encourages businesses to stay where they are. So this causes a big problem for what they call this low activity or kanang poor communities. How do they attract businesses when businesses themselves don't want to move? So it's a good idea to see what kind of factors we can consider to attract businesses in our sort of developing uh, barangays, towns, or cities, or even provinces. So transportation costs basically say if it's cheaper to transport their goods, the firm or business will locate there. For there are two types of transportation-oriented businesses: the weight gaining and the weight losing. So the weight gaining, basically, as the name suggests, the product becomes heavier when it reaches its final state. Like so, the example in the book was um, a drink, some kind of drink, like maybe a boba tea or something like that, where it suggests that transporting the goods and like in their the different components of a good. For example, that tea, you have the powder, the little squishy things. It's cheaper for them to locate where their target market is because assembling it or creating the finished product first will make it heavier and therefore it will cost more to transport. The other one is weight losing. For example, I think very appropriate that a lot of us here are in the construction industry. The example was a timber factory. So they will locate where the trees are, slowly cut down the trees to timber, and then sell to wherever they need to be sold. So these companies or these firms would locate where the raw materials are. The other one, the weight gaining one, would locate to where the customers are. So I think the question for urban planners is, does that particular product have a customer base or a consumer base in your local community? Next, production costs. So there's a lot. I think you can write a whole report on this. Maybe we can focus on this for your assignment. But several factors, uh, the skill of the labor, the quality of life. I'll just go through what's written down here in the book. And just based on my experience, explain what I think are being mentioned here. So let's see here. Labor costs. So how much does labor, how much does you need to pay people? Usually rates are more higher in highly urbanized cities. For example, wages in Manila, I feel like, if I remember correctly, are higher than they are in Cebu. That's why urban centers would attract more people from less urbanized cities to higher urbanized cities because there's more people there, more activity going on. The reason for higher wages in very dense urban cities because there's also a higher, what do you call this, cost of living. So it kind of balances out. The ideal situation would be you live in in an area with a low cost of living and have income from a company that pays you higher than average. So that's more on the worker side, but for the firms, this is one factor that they would want to stay away from. They would want to have wages that are at least bearable for their profits, and they don't want to locate where the wage rates are higher than their profits. Quality of life, this is a bit more general. I'll skip this one. Taxes makes sense. They want to locate where it's easier to do business. Different sort of cities, and I think in the Philippines, even different provinces have different sort of tax rates. And that is very much connected to government incentives and infrastructure, so they kind of go hand in hand. And then the following is local business climate and regulation. So again, talking about ease of business. Me myself, I don't own a business, so I've always been a, what do you call this, a worker instead of a business owner. So I don't have a lot of experience. Maybe some of you could shed some light on this if you are business owners. Energy costs, kind of directly affecting with transportation. Like for example, depending on the good you make, you may have, for example, higher electrical bills, higher water bills, and this will sort of be very connected with your site. So if you're in the middle of nowhere, utilities like water and electricity may be more expensive. In general, most firms would locate in the city center because all the utilities are there. The other factor is national political climate and stability. So I think very obvious now, businesses wouldn't want political turmoil. I guess this is one of the main problems with the Philippines. We have a lot of kanang instability in our politics. Like people are not too confident with local government, and this kind of scares away potential investors. So our goal as policymakers and urban planners is to sort of soothe the tension between the local communities and the local government. And then finally, opportunity creation. This is very kind of general lang na term. I'll just quickly go over it over here. Firms may seek locations, areas that provide unspecified future opportunities. A bit subjective. How do you define, or how do you even quantify opportunity creation? I guess you can say that an area may have a larger skilled worker base. And then what comes into that are like, are their workers more educated? Are they trained better? Are they what makes them different from workers in other locations? So maybe factors like the number of universities, again, the urbanization rate. Very likely that people in urban areas are more educated and more trained than those in the rural areas. Okay, so decision-making process for firms. I'll just like highlight very quickly. So they need to be motivated to get into, they need to have a need, or they need to want to relocate. There are some practical limitations, as it's really profit defined. Like, is it profitable for them to go to that area? And then site selection is interesting to me because this is similar to, for those who took up architecture, your site selection process. I think all of your thesis at some point had to deal with site selection. So need recognition is just basically identifying your stakeholders and the site, identifying your problem, basically. The site selection team, if you were in a architecture course, you were part of the site selection team. If you were in a business course or a political science course, you need to look for people who are familiar with the different site selection factors, and then developing their criteria. This can be done with non-architects, construction professionals, together with business professionals and other all those courses in between. And then narrowing the choices, basically site analysis, checking off a list. Now, does this site cater to our needs? And then just like go down the list of which site has the most appeal. And then you discuss with local officials. I mean, the firms will discuss with local officials, and they will reach a final decision. So this is another interesting section of the reference. It says that traditional location factors remain the most important, which I think is true even until today, but they are diminishing because of education, unionization, personal reasons. This one is a bit vague for me. I think I'll go through the reference again to see what they actually mean by personal reasons here. Decision-making process, vice present. Yeah, it doesn't really expound more what these personal reasons are. So there must have a, in contrast, from his review, looking at 1963, found the real factors, particularly the only factors that matter. So it changed from 1960 to like the 1990s and all the way to today, to the 2000s, where I think it also holds true that education, business climate, and familiarity with local conditions really influence the decision of firms. So again, talking about firms wanting to have their profits secured, they really don't want to take unnecessary risks. Okay, Again, sort of connected to education, technology reduce the significance of proximity to raw materials and transportation costs. So with better sort of transportation technology, you could technically and also I think practically reduce the cost of transportation. And then obviously local taxes have an impact. Again, I'm not a business owner, but I've talked to some other architects who said that the reason why they don't want to expand their sort of office is because they pay less tax if they have less workers, and then they're more quote unquote less well known, so they don't have to pay more tax. So it really depends on the business owner, like what they're comfortable with. And then finally, the range of places that need to be evaluated has expanded to the global scale. So in the Philippines, I'm not sure if we have any global level industries. Some of you, especially those in the political science field, may be more aware of what kinds of businesses are existing in the Philippines that could be expanded to the global scale. I guess we can say the education business or the health industry, where I think everyone remembers like a few decades ago, we were exporting a lot of nurses. Nurses were in very high demand. So everybody wanted to be a nurse. And then I guess in some way, maybe I'm not sure if some hospitals actually migrated abroad. This is more from the worker side. From the firms, I really don't know. I'm not that knowledgeable on firms. I can just tell you my learnings from the reference. So business retention expansion programs, how do you make them? You develop a questionnaire and an interview team. So kind of like research, which is basically what we're doing here in the university, conducting interviews. In the university, we have the research ethics committee, which will help you sort of fine tune your interviews and really focus on your main topic and avoid like very controversial issues. Like I guess the biggest one is kind of questions that might breach personal information. Just making sure that your questionnaires stay on track and they don't sort of elicit kind of too much personal information that may cause the harm of the interviewees. Then finally, analysis. I think we're all doing that. Anyone with a bachelor's degree can do some level of analysis. And then continual follow-up. This is the tricky part in the Philippines. Like even my own projects, I make a proposal and then the follow-up is almost never there because I'm on to the next project. And it's very difficult to push projects, especially if you're a small group and then some people like have their lives to live and they can't be as focused on just the one project. They need to go to the next project to like actually have a living. And then in summary, so again, increasingly local location policies are oriented towards improving existing businesses rather than taking a business located in another area. And this proves a big challenge for local government units, barangays, cities and provinces that look to expand or develop their what they call this, their community, because it will be very difficult to attract new sort of sponsors, investors, and I guess the only way is really to improve what's already there. So maybe a lot of you mentioned before in this class, they want more commercial areas. They want to attract more businesses and sort of take over the agricultural land and convert it to more commercial uses. Maybe the correct sort of approach would be to improve your agricultural areas. But that really depends on your local community. And like, what is your experience with your kind of local agriculture? For me, based on my readings and the way we're taught in Sydney, agricultural tourism is the new sort of kind of way to invite or boost local economy or economic development. Make your existing sort of facilities and let's say businesses your attraction instead of looking for new businesses to come to your area. And then this also goes in line with the transportation cost minimizing models. Whereas since the agricultural land is already there, you may, what do you call this, improve their transportation costs by providing like programs where they don't have to pay as much. And then remember, in our previous lecture, there was a theory that said exporting firms or exporting businesses will yield more economic development than those importing. So if you have agricultural land, more likely you are producing goods like fruits, vegetables that is more than your need. So you may be able to export. So again, sort of trending towards improving existing businesses than sort of trying to attract new businesses from other areas. And then low production costs may encourage a firm to locate away from the transportation cost sort of factors. So in your area, I guess from a urban planning perspective, we can try to determine how much the average wage is, the median wage is. And then those areas where the wage is fairly close to the average, let's say national average, maybe those locations will be attractive for new businesses. And I think more than likely that those places where wages are below or around the same as the national average will have already existing businesses. And then finally, firms are generally profit oriented but are risk averse. So again, going towards the first statement, it will be very difficult to convince businesses and firms to go to your area unless they make a very significant profit, because they will, again, talking about inertia, they will tend to stay in their safe spot rather than risk everything and lose their customer base. So for me, this is what I understood from the readings. Let's go through each of you. Like, what did you understand? Okay, I think I'll just stop sharing. So we had a lot of time reading, and this is really the masteral work. Sorry, I didn't have my slides prepared, but I want to hear your thoughts. Let's start with Maria, Natalie. So from your readings of the what is economic development, what is the factors for business location, what is kanang something that you learned na is new, or do you agree or disagree with anything sa readings?
I agree with the reading, sir. Pero ang murag nitatak gyud na ko ang technological advancement bitaw kay
Mm.
somehow it replaced the services and the production in manufacturing. So
Mm.
which caused on it somehow lessened the manpower kay murag machines do the work na, and of course gi-assist Japan siya og human, pero instead nga need kag dako nga manpower ni gamay-gamay na lang.
Mm.
And also still karon transportation costs are high, nga in fact naanay mga transportation himo na siya service bitaw, like kaning mga delivery services
Mm.
ang in which i-accommodate na niya like mga Shopee delivery ana dayon makita na to nga essential siya, and mahal siya kay mahal man ang mga delivery fees sa
Mm.
mga like Lazada, Shopee ana, and it is due to increase in fuel.
Mm. Okay. Is that happening in your area? Taga-asa gani ka, Maria?
Negros or Tanhay.
Okay, Negros. Do you see these things happening in your area?
Sa delivery nga part, sir, oo, kay sige man jud na ay mga Shopee deliveries everywhere. But
Mm.
manufacturing wala kayo, sir. Wala.
Okay. What is the kanang main economic activity sa Negros in your opinion lang?
Agriculture, sir.
Agriculture. Okay, okay. Sige. So do you feel like after our reading this, do you feel like important ang agriculture, or do you feel na it's still not worth it? Na much better if we go into like cattle manufacturing and other sort of non-agricultural na businesses?
Mas better gid og ang economy i-localize bitaw sir, so
Mm.
we will look into agriculture jud para pud mas mo makasupply na ang kuan
Mm.
ang localities, dili na siya magsalig sa mga imported goods.
No good. Maybe I'll ask you to write about the agriculture in Negros. Okay, next let's go to Mary, Syra.
Sir, actually, kung i-base lang nako sa ako ang perspective sa among hometown, sir, ha, kanang somewhat mo agree pag sa kaning sa book wherein kaning sa last part na katong lisod kay invite o mga investors or businessmen to mo kuan sa among area ba tungod sa kanang among kung unsay current state na mo wherein wala kayo manufacturing or more on agriculture.
Mm.
So, in terms of transportation, more agi-agi naman sa noon ang mga kanang mag-deliver or unsa pa na. Pero more on sa transportation mo so mostly sa among local mo adto mo og Danao to work. So,
Mhm.
more ana ba more same said na mahal pud ang plite tungod kay mahal pud ang fuel ana something like that ba.
Mm. Okay. Taga-asa ka, Mary?
Sa Katmon, sir.
Katmon. So, just like a general question, what is the in your opinion, the main economic activities at Katmon?
More on sa kuan gid sir. So, local businesses lang and then majority na kay agricultural.
Majority agricultural feeling nimo. Okay. Sige. Queen Lee, your turn. What stood out to you sa readings? Did you change your mind or did your conceptions of what businesses and economic development basically got reinforced?
Um, Sir, I'm also
Hello?
from Tanay Negros Oriental. Can you hear me, sir? Hello? Hello, sir?
You're getting unmuted, bro. There's no audio coming out.
Sir, okay lang mo out sa ako, di ako ibalik para ma-refresh lang.
Maybe I'll get back to Quinley. Nelson, were your ideas about economics and businesses change or did they stay the same based on the readings?
Actually, naa siya relevant in case sa kuan experience such as kuan sir kanang selecting projects for subdivisions and condominiums. Then what I see, as I understood sir nga, usually select upon selecting a site should be marketable. And then whether ang mga studies na to, usually we collect it, then ang locational clear factors that greatly affect upon selecting site, that would include nga kanang dapat ang imuhang site is very profitable, and then the quality of life in which, for example, when we have a project, ang sa tawag the occupant should have a quality of life. So akong understanding, a quality of life should have a kanang amenities where people could enjoy and could satisfy. And then taxes also do affect in terms of selecting sites. For example, here in ako lang kuha na kay sa Cebu City, usually taxes are very high because of, as we all know, it's kuan siya highly urbanized city. And then we also select as a kuan sa kanang in terms of energy cost, it's very important that kanang when we select the site or for the project, as we all know as an architecture nga, ngita kita nga naa siya kanang all the needs or energy such as water, utilities, electricity, na-exist na gid siya. And this, I think, what to make atong projects livable. I think that's it, sir.
Okay. So, kita do Cebu City based man ta. Would you agree na kuanta in Cebu our main economic activity is kanang commercial and construction?
Sa Cebu City, sir?
Hmm.
I think sa Cebu City more on focus sa BPO, more on kanang works. Tanong na ko sa akong nakita lang sir kay more on kwan siya kanang magnet the labor. Magnet siya sa more on kanang kwan, and then I think ang commercial food, I think naa siya ni exist, but napod siya ang said I think one of the sa apod sa example sa Ayala kanang since Ayala becomes sa kanang kwan sir kanang mura siya gihimo na siyang recreational area since ang lugar na to sa Cebu City is very kuan kay siya kanang rapid or very crowded, and then one of the most benefit they provide a kanang centered commercial centered wherein people could have a good quality of life as much as my understanding kanang amenities, sir. That's it, sir.
Okay, good. See, Sir Ali, your turn. So I'm sure the kag opinions ani.
Yeah, thank you, Sir Roy. I actually make my note, then let me share kung okay ra, Sir Roy,
No, yeah, much
so that
better.
everybody can see. So this is my notes while reading the article, no, from Blair and Carol. Hopefully you can see, guys.
Kita ra.
So the blue, orange, and the green are the ones cited by the article by Blair and Carol. The one in yellow are the things that I see because this was written 2009, and the evolution and how business works and even how the government works really evolved. No, before we call it like take for example we call it climate change. Now we call it resiliency. Before we call it disaster. Now we call it resiliency. Before we call it government incentives or in an infrastructure. Now we call it basic development infrastructure or ease of doing business. So these are the things that I see in relation to the article, which is very good, very foundational, and also an understanding how does 2009 works. Because the 2009, that is where the prime of digital space is still on its going to its peak, no? So wala kaayo, although the technological advancement was mentioned, but it's not really highlighted in the article because it's not yet on its prime, it's not yet on its peak. I believe in 2009 the peak is mobile phone. Now also ang text, also ang call, but when the digital space are now coming in, less na lang magpa-load ang uban because there's now data, there's now messenger, there's now the digital space is now available. So one thing that I realized on the article, it's number one, it's focused on business productivity, no? Although economic productivity, but it's more on attracting and retaining businesses, no? So which was really the point of discussion in the 2009 context. But in our generation now, because of its fast development, there is now what we call as new or business development department or new business department in every business or corporate world. The new business or business development department, they don't just attract business. They don't just retain business. They go to areas where they can do business. So that's how the new business development work. Meaning they study the area, they work on the area, they look for areas. This one, it's more on attracting. If you are from the local government perspective, how can we attract? How can we retain? But in this generation, in this particular time, it's more on how can we make our LGU? How can we make our local government promote to the business sector? Because there's now new business development coming in. Maybe they will go to our area. They will check our area. And it's also kanang na ako'y gi-highlight diri na it's somewhat green na blue kaning quality of life because it's aligned to the advocacy of where NGO I am in right now, Cebu Leads Foundation, where we always say if the plan is people-centric, if the planning of the local government is people-centric, meaning the point is how can we improve the quality of the individual, the constituent, the well-being of every individual. Because for us, if we focus on the people, if we focus on making our city livable because we want to focus our people, then we can be competitive. Then the economy will follow. Which was also cited by the article. That's why I color it blue because I want to look at it in before 2000 at the same time in now context. I also, if you see the line, this is somehow my understanding on how I see it today. In 2009, they call it transportation. Today, I call it mobility.
Correct.
It's not just focused on the vehicle alone, no. It's not just focused on the cargo alone, the public transportation alone, the number of cars running in the road, but it's more on how many people are moving, how many people are transported from A to B. That's why it's called mobility and not transportation, because we're now measuring the movement and basic transportation economic principle. If there is movement, there is development. That's why I term it mobility in search of transportation. And this is true. Actually, for the last 2 to 3 years, our inflation rate was 20% to 40% in terms of transportation costs, because we don't dwell on transportation enough. We don't provide mass public transportation. We don't provide people to go to biking, cycling. We don't provide other modes of transportation because we just want to focus on jeepneys lang, limited ourselves to jeepneys. In fact, for Cebu, ridership data alone, we're very prepared 10 years ago for mass transport and talking about the rail as a backbone transportation for Cebu, but we don't work on it. And there are other areas as well that is ready for rail already. If you look at the number of riding commuters in your area, maybe it's high time to improve. Maybe it's high time to upgrade from jeepneys, tricycle to other, make it more massive, like bus, it could be BRT, or for Cebu, in Metro Davao, even Metro Cagayan, even Metro Iloilo, it's really high time for us to go rail. Because let's measure the transportation costs in terms of moving people rather than cars. Then I also put a line here, aside from labor costs, maybe in our generation, we call it talent availability. No? Aside man God, it is still significant today about labor costs, because some European cars is now shifting their business model. No, some Japanese car are now getting Indonesia to manufacture their cars. That's why our cars right now is very cheap. Some European car are now sent to China to make their production very cheap. That's why European cars are very less expensive right now. No? Which is still really true because their labor cost is cheap. But in the Philippine context, it's more on the talent availability. We have talents here. That's why BPO was converted from business processing outsourcing, customer service. It's now TPO, knowledge process outsourcing, because they come here not because we know English. They come here because we have talent, and that's very unique, and that's very an edge in the Philippines. Internet of Things is a game maker. It's a change maker. It could affect location, because right now, even though you're home, you can be productive. You don't need to move. You don't need to go out. In fact, right now we're studying our masters, but we're not moving anywhere.
Yeah.
But we're still productive, and it could affect location businesses. That's why if you're familiar with agile workplace, shared workplace, co-shared workplace, and there are a lot here in Cebu, and I'm sure there are also in Dumaguete, Davao, and other areas. Areas now where you can work, areas where you can study. It's a co-shared, it's an agile workplace. Because you can now, there is a term work from home, but there's a more advanced term, work from anywhere. And that could affect
Yes.
location. Because if you're a businessman and my model of business has the tendency to make my employee work from home, then location could be anywhere. It could be not on the strategic side. It's okay as long as there is good internet connection. And in relation to Internet of Things, will be the social media space and also the creatives. I would like to highlight this, and also because the context today and the context before is totally different. And if you look at the gap, it's just, let's say, 12 years or 13 years ago. But development is really fast, especially when the technologies are here. And lastly, in terms of economic business productivity, I would like also to emphasize international and national competitiveness. And this is applicable not just to the Philippines, but even to local government units, to cities. If your cities are competitive, again, the market now is open to everybody. We're not just competing within the cities within the Philippines, but we're also competing cities in Asia, cities against the world. So your ranking internationally, your ranking nationally would really matter in terms of competitiveness. And if you are very competitive, then you are good, you are ready, you can be a hot pot for investment. So that's part of my notes. Then going down is the part of the discussion. So while reading, I'm also making this graph, no? How does the local government decision-making process work? It could be motivation. Basically, the article, again, since 2009, is really local government-centric approach. How does the local government think of business development? But basically, right now, the shifting, instead of local government thinking of that, local government now thinks of, I'm the support, then the business will come. No? So the need, the motivation, getting to know the motivation, and right now it's not just even profit making. It's just really making sure that my area, if you are a local government unit, you don't think that I'll be getting profit from this, but think of how many people will be employed. We call it in the development world, because I'm an NGO. In business, they call it return of investment. The money, that the return of their capital, the return of their investment. That's what they call return of it. In the social world or in the development world, we call it social return of investment. So if a company invests on this area, what would be the social return? We count not the money, we count number of families that are being saved because of these economic opportunities. Like if you employ 10 people, that's equivalent to 10 person, that person has 10 families, which they can support. And for SROI, if we measure it, that's already 10 families being supported. No? So we count it like that. And government should think like that, because we're not business centric. We should not think about return of investment. Should we make money from this? But our lens as a local government, if you are from local government, but for me, my lens as a social worker, a development worker, and an NGO worker is really based on improving the quality of life, the well-being of individual. Now go back, the blue one is still on the part of the decision-making process, but on the discussion on the article of Blair and Carroll, it's more on the corporate. If the yellow circle is the government processes on how to make decisions, the blue one, it's the corporate. How did they make decisions? Like it must be need-based recognition. In that article, they call it recognition. But for me, my understanding, it must, the product or the business should be need-based. Is this needed by the company? Is this needed by the people? Is this needed by the market? And the criteria is also important. For me, it's just a guide, parang job description. Then from that three selection team, you can narrow the choices. No, you can narrow and select the location. Very important as well, political support. And lastly, part of the article was the company budget. Does the company has enough money to invest for it? And I would like also to emphasize learning and development. Because right now, before, in 2009, where most of the millennials are growing, in 2009, even before 2009, the shift is more on how many or how much is the salary. No? The bigger the salary, the better. If you offer more salary, the better. But because of the shift of human development, retaining personnel, people would not care anymore how much is their money. People would not care anymore how much is the salary. But people would care on, do I have a good boss? Do I have a good manager? Do I have a good and not toxic environment? And do they provide learning and development opportunity? In short, would my personal and professional career would grow on this company? If not, then I will resign. That's why it's typical for a Generation Z right now, in a 6 months period of time, he can have 2 or 3 employers. Because they think of not just salary, but they think of personal and career development. So that's why I added here, because that's also my understanding based on my context now. And unsay murag wala na mention on the 2009 context. So this is my notes based on the Blair and Carroll article, which is really foundational. How does the 2009 local economic development happen situation then 10 years after? And basically, it's because there was a crisis, and the crisis, there's always an opportunity. So that's my somehow reaction for the article, Sir Roy. And good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, very good. I think we're all impressed with the Himo Yugag presentation. Very nice notes, Sir Ellie. Sort of just piggybacking over what Sir Ellie said. We had a presentation from Cebu City Planning Office, former faculty member of University of San Carlos, architect Ann Quizon. I think alam mong Sir Ellie. Presented to our class the sort of the upcoming plans or the rezoning of Cebu City, because I don't think we have an updated zoning map yet. So this is the map here. So for context, I'll open up Cebu City map for those not in Cebu. So and so let's switch to 3D, if I can do 3D. Yes, like that. And then let's turn on the terrain. I can't have 3D for the terrain. Anyway, so we are here, Cebu City, sort of like in the middle of the province. Notice that almost, I think the number is about 70% of our land is kanang hilly or mountainous, which makes it difficult to develop, but we still develop it anyway. If you can see the 3D, we have Marco Plaza Cebu, Marco Polo Plaza, we have Busay, a bunch of Maria Luisa Highland Clubhouse and Park. So we still like push developing up into our mountains, which is kind of dangerous, but this is also reflected in our sort of development plan. So the goal of Cebu City Planning Office is that we need to preserve our upland areas while reinforcing our downtown area. So we have developments in downtown. There are two. The new CBD with the South Road Reclamation, or the SRP, South Road projects, or the South Reclamation Project, which I will show you like this. It's basically reclaimed land, and it's still very empty at the moment. Sort of reinforcing that idea that businesses really don't like to transfer. This was constructed, SRP completed in, I forgot, early 2010s. South Road, South Reclamation Project. Completion date. Under Manini Osmeña. That was it's, what does it say, 2023? Southward Properties. The first part was completed. Let's see. History, 1980s. The project started civil works in 1997 and was financed. Construction works of the land was completed in 2002. So it's been 20 years. And you can see it's still not fully occupied. So I'll go down here to the street level. So it's all vacant land. But this is basically kanang very attractive, but mostly for large firms, not the one, specifically large and international firms. So this has been targeted as like the new downtown. And then to the north of it, we have the Downtown Heritage Core. So ang interesting aspect, what's already existing sa Cebu is we have a very rich heritage district. Basically, if you heard the story about Magellan, Magellan came to Cebu. He apparently planted his cross somewhere here, and we have that site. We have Magellan's Cross here. And around this area, we have some of the oldest streets in the Philippines because we were discovered first. We have a lot of museums, but again, the issue is it's not very accessible because this area is very old. There's a lot of negative connotations about like the dirt, the crime, the safety. So this is one major project, sort of aligning what we discussed now, improving the businesses or the what do you call this, the resources that you already have. So that is one core project of the Cebu City government. And then here we have the midtown and uptown areas. Midtown is where all the businesses are, or like the medium to low to medium, and also a bit of like high income, high level businesses. They're here in the midtown area. And then the uptown area is where our residential, or kind of, I guess, mid to high income residential areas. So these are where the good residential areas are. And unfortunately, some of them are penetrating our peri-urban area, which we need to preserve, because the negative effects include landslide, flooding, and this happens annually in the Philippines. So it should be a very big concern. Na developers should be stopped, or not really stopped, but regulated to preserve, again, talking about what Sir Eli mentioned, the quality of life in Cebu, because that's really what kanang maintains or creates kanang sustainable development. I'll go to Sydney for a little bit. So Sydney, because I lived there for 3 years, I could really feel the investment in quality of life, where the government steps in, and I think also academe and other sort of NGOs step in to really think about what's good for our local community. And you can see it in one of their newer projects, the Barangaroo redevelopment site. I'll just bring up an image here, Barangaroo. Barangaroo. This is one of my sort of favorite topics because I've seen it develop. Let's see, location. Let's see. There should be a map here. Barangaroo development, Sydney. Okay, so it's a waterfront development. So if you see the map here, this one is a good image. I'll try to calculate the area for you guys because I can't remember it off the top of my head. 22 hectares, waterfront precinct. So this is a large urban planning project. So originally, they wanted 50% open space, meaning vegetation, but through some kind of maybe some illegal handling, some shady handlings, they increase ang commercial area. And then this is where kanang NGOs and the local community stepped in and said, we wanted more of our kanang open parks or park areas developed. So this is an older version. If I go to the newer version or the actual version, I think you'll see na they kind of, let's see, let's look for a better image. I guess this is a better image. They were unfortunately kanang pushed out. Again, not so much a kanang sign of success, but sort of like a warning where if we don't step in and protect our kanang local areas, development will really kanang overtake our kanang green space. But in general, you can see a lot more parks and public space in Sydney and in the developed countries than here in Cebu. And I think some of the advantage of those less developed areas, you still have a lot of public space. And sort of connecting with what Sir Eli mentioned about mobility and quality of life, you feel more on. I really feel like not here in the highway. Let's go to the park area, maybe somewhere here. I can't go down. Let's see here. You can really tell that the people are, in my experience, friendlier in Sydney than they are in Cebu City. Like a lot of people can just like, you can talk to them, ask them for directions. And the general kanang murag, the atmosphere is a lot lighter. I think it's because they're very much taken care of. So there's like bus stops, open parks. Mas kuan pod, feeling na ko, people are less judgy in the developed countries. And I think that's because they feel like they're taken care of. I think more so than America, the people in Australia even are friendlier than the people in Cebu and are friendlier than the people in America. So this kind of like social investment, I think, is what we should push for as urban planners and sort of kanang actors in the economic development space. And sort of connecting that, going back to Cebu, this is where the thrust of kanang mobility is going. So you have here 5 major arterial roads, proposed mass transport modes in Cebu City. So in the upland area, they're proposing a Metro Cebu Expressway, sort of connecting the north and south of the province. We have public and private BRT routes in the uptown area, sort of to connect the residences in the uptown area to the commercial areas in the midtown area, all the way down to those in the downtown area. And then we are also, the government is proposing pedestrian-dominated or transit-oriented development through the Metro Cebu Green Loop. So that's here in the midtown area. And then also in the midtown area, the North-South Road LRT route. So talking about what Sir Ellie mentioned about mass transportation. So they're still proposing they're planning a light rail route. So what is the difference between light rail and heavy rail? The railway is smaller. I think I mentioned this before last week. And then finally in the downtown area, a coastal road or monorail kanang route. And I think, I forgot to mention in the upland area, they're also thinking about cable cars because of the geography of the upland area in Cebu. Did I leave? I left Cebu City. Because we went up there, I think, when was that? Last week in Cebu City, the upland areas of Cebu City. There are really a lot of kanang peaks and valleys that if you look at it, it may benefit from cable car. So that was in Barangay Sinsin, Cebu City. And you can see here, I'll just go down maybe somewhere, somewhere here. If you look at this area, there's a lot of houses, there's like a modern house here. You can see their houses up here, and then they go all the way kanang down there, downstream. So we're basically at the top of the mountain. Elevation is about 600 meters from sea level. And you can't really see because there's a tree in the way. I'll keep going down here. They have residential areas, they have a school. But I think the only issue is they don't have as much kanang connectivity. I don't know the quality of their internet in this area. They have some shops. The main issue with this area is that because there are already people living here, there's a demand for kanang goods and services. So down the stream, basically at that lower elevations, you have agricultural land and also a lot of kanang piggeries or kanang basically they farm pigs, some cows. But the problem is that because they're very kanang informal, the waste of the cows and the animals are being tossed into the river, which is kind of like the main issue with kanang people living in these sort of virgin or upland areas, like where there's not a lot of access. So maybe if they had cable cars, they could connect to the lower areas. Like maybe, I'll just zoom out, like so. Maybe if the cable cars were pushed through, people from Sinsin, measure distance, could get food from Talisay, which I think is known for their, is it Talisay lechon or is it Karkar lechon? Where is Karkar? Karkar is somewhere more south, I think. Yeah, but there's a lot of commercial areas here in Tabunok, Talisay, basically the next municipality south of Cebu. And then if we could create access there or improve mobility from these uptown areas or upland areas, we could really save a lot of kanang from pollution, environmental degradation, and also, again, increasing the quality of life. But there's a lot of people here, and whether we like it or not, they will continue to live here because of the opportunities in urban areas. And then it's really up to us to manage like how much pollution, how much waste is created from like these what they call this, the attraction of people to come to urban areas to find better life. So yeah, that's basically it. I promised an assignment, but we have 10 minutes here. I'll just, let's see, what can I do? We don't have time. I guess we'll just do the assignment next meeting. We'll do a quick lecture here on, well, there's no more readings for market area analysis. So I think we'll just bench that to the next week. We'll write a short report about existing business incentives and tools used in the Philippines, like just based on your experience. I would recommend checking out the Philippine Institute for Development Studies here. So they should have resources on existing policies, and just pick one that you think is interesting. Or alternatively, you can pick some policies or some projects that are similar to your local area. Well, I'll cite some examples. Let's see here. I have 10 minutes. So in the Philippines, we're looking at a lot of kanang BPO. So let's just search for kanang keywords, BPO and KPO. No need for an author. Let's see. Let's look at publications and stuff. Focus area is in economic outlook, environment and natural resources. I'll recheck my syllabus. Business incentives. Let's see if there's anything business incentives here. Infrastructure, labor and education. I think labor is where we want to be. And let's just leave it as to any year. Oh, no results found. Let's say BPO lang. Okay, how about that? BPO receipts to remain strong this year. Philippines government think tank says Philippine government thinking banking on BPO sector not enough to cut poverty, according to experts. Let's check the one from 2017. So this is a news article. Known to provide good jobs. I said relying on the sector alone would not significantly reduce poverty. It's more poverty, so not really what we. Let's see here. What this one? There are projected slow economic growth. Business process and receipts are seen to maintain momentum this year, given the demand for virtual employees post-pandemic, according to state think tank. So Philippine Institute forecast a slow economic growth of 4.5 to 5.5% in 2023. This is below the government target of 6 to 7%. So this is just news. Let's look at any keywords, anything on any resource on labor and education. Let's search. Nothing. Let's look at, let's see, database. Okay, nothing on labor and research. What about if we change to economic outlook? And I just economic outlook. Let's see, we got tame inflation and forex volatility, sustain policy reforms to boost PH economy in 2023. This one's a bit too, the view received strong this year. Think that new growth drivers seen needed after pandemic economic scarring. These are news, event, news. Let's look for resources, not so much news. Search. Okay, voila. Publication. Here. Accelerate post-pandemic recovery through social justice. Sort of connecting with what Sir Eli said about improving the social aspect. This one is news. So let's not use news so much. Let's try to find any publications because I think this is free to download. So you download the file. You just need to input a few data here. Preparing school curriculum course for reports and thesis. This is optional, so you don't need to put in your name. You just need to put in your address. And JLMARE, I am not a robot, download now. So you just wait. And these publications are very kanang detailed, which is very kanang will be useful for you if you have any kanang thesis, etc. So this is a 220-page document. So that's a lot. So let's see what's inside here. We got macroeconomic prospects, policy memos, increase investments in primary care and allocate resources for improved health outcomes. We have close the gap. So introduction, disproportionate impacts of the pandemic, structural inequities. So let's look at some of these like policy memos. Let's go to the middle, around 53. So enhancing social mobility, reduce inequality. So in 2016, National Economic Development Authority launched Ambition Natin 2040. Let's go skip here. Strengthen human capital development. And then let's see what are the outputs. Priority 4, actionable to-do list. Hopefully this has any reviews. Oh, it's just kanang a list of policies that were launched. Let's see, let's look at another policy here. Improve social protection design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So before COVID-19 pandemic, the Philippines has shown stellar trends in socioeconomic performance and made headway in reducing income poverty, income inequality, and multidimensional poverty. The pandemic, however, greatly affected the country's macroeconomic and development trajectory. Its economic growth entered negative territory in 2020 for the first time since 1999. Unemployment reached a historic high of 17.6% in April 2020, while underemployment rate was at 18.9%, much higher than the previous figures. So what is the priority here? Blah, blah, blah. So priority 1. So when was this sort of policy? Let's see. It's all background stuff. Recent data suggests that this extreme poverty rate was reduced from 6% in 2021 to further 4% in 2022. The Philippines is determined to reach its zero extreme poverty target by 2030, zero poverty. However, inflation has gone over government targets due largely to effects of the war between Russia and Ukraine, which hurts those vulnerable to poverty more. Administration 8-point agenda. So this is like national lang na policy. Let's see what else is here. Various authors revisit housing in the Philippines, lack of affordable housing. So this is basically a collection of reviews and not exactly kanama pa. So this might be useful. We got 3 minutes. I'll try to find something on businesses. See, upskill, technical education, enhance social mobility, improving social protection, promote decent work for Filipino workers. It's more on the worker side. Let's look at, try to find business, promote, embrace alignment, leverage innovation, intensify support. There's agricultural modernization, which is kind of like a business sector. Safe, ecological, sustained building. Average trade agreements reduce trade complexities and uncertainties to boost economic activity. So this is kind of near what we're looking for. Page 121. Let's try to go to there. Okay, here. So this is various authors policy memo. What do you have here? Trade is an important component of the Philippine economy as it integrates the country to the global economy. For the last 3 years, the ratio of trade to gross domestic product averaged 63.5%. The Philippines stopped exporting industries such as electronics, coconut oil manufacturing, and machinery and transport equipment, provide substantial employment and foreign exchange earnings. However, the Russia-Ukraine war has demonstrated how precarious and internationally connected the supply of commodities is. The war has resulted in a sharp rise in global commodity prices, given that Russia and Ukraine supply essential goods, including food, energy, and fertilizers. These spikes have been transmitted to the domestic markets, resulting in high inflation rates. As of June 2022, the headline inflation rate for all items was the highest since 2018, while food inflation at the national level has reached 6.4% in the same month. Optimism, but meanwhile, lockdowns in China. So, let's see, increase the country's capacity to face the VUCA world. So it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. So what do they do? To navigate through and respond effectively to future shocks, the government should optimize the country's participation in regional cooperation mechanisms that seek to promote coordinated responses to global challenges. So looking at ASEAN Emergency Operations Center Network, ASEAN Food Security Information System, and ASEAN Emergency Rice Reserve. Ensuring that flow of goods, services, and people is resilient to economic and climate-related shocks helps facilitate faster recovery and prepare for the anticipated global economic slowdown. So I think it would be easier to, this is a bit, I think, complex or advanced. Let's just base it on your local community. Like, what can you find in your local area? And for example, let's look for here. Author, keywords, economic outlook. Let's see, infrastructure, international relations, poverty, trade and industry, corporate events, peace and security. Let's go over my notes here. Businesses, let's see, transportation costs. So for infrastructure, transportation, and communication, let's look for publications. Philippine air transport, implications of developing a nuclear energy program, electricity, road and rail transport. This might be interesting. OPS, downstream industry regulation, school infrastructure, government strategies. Let's try looking at this one. Let's see. In the study, the analysis of quantity and quality indicators in the road and rail transport sector shows that the Philippines continues to suffer from inadequate and poor quality road and rail transport infrastructure. In most metrics in comparison to ASEAN neighbors, the Philippines is also behind in improving the quantity and quality of its road and rail infrastructure. The assessment targets and achievements of the Philippine Development Plan, the Public Investment Program, and the Expenditure Program reveals that many of the targets was unmet. So we can say policies are not working. The low absorptive capacity, as indicated in unmet expenditure targets and major agencies in charge of road and rail, suggest problems in implementation. Digging deeper into the implementation challenges, the study finds that the persistent problems are, I'll just zoom in a bit. Come on. I don't know why it doesn't center. Right-of-way acquisition, and the persistent problems are right-of-way acquisition, financing, political intervention, weak capacity at the government level, natural calamities, and project management issues. So there were also newly introduced problems. One is the adverse effects of the pandemic on materials and manpower supply chain. So it makes sense. A lot of people had to stop work during the pandemic. But systems for addressing these are already in place, and implementing agencies just need to continue improving the implementation of revised procedures in response to the pandemic. Another newly introduced problem is the difficulty of implementing projects under the 4 later release funds category of, this was a bit high level now. Meanwhile, the public is getting caught in a battle of wills between 2 major influences, the legislators and the sitting president, on budget allocation, releases, and implementation. At the national level, seeking reform champions for minimizing congressional introductions and fast-tracking executive approvals is necessary. At the regional level, one solution that can be attempted is for government officials to strengthen the practice of project identification and prioritization through the Regional Development Council process. So I guess connected na siya sa regional planning, which kind of is the topics of urban planning. but it's unfortunate it doesn't say anything about the kind of local level, which is, I guess local level is more urban design. So maybe this one will be useful. It's been cited 4 times. Let's just take a quick look. Let's see, thesis, enter full name, 2ZIS. Okay, let's take a look inside here. We have assessment of role and capacity, planning, programming, and spending targets, implementation challenges, and then conclusions and policy insights. So let's just go down to the conclusions. Okay, it's very long. Shown that Philippines are basically what we said in the abstract. Let's see if they have any tables or other data. Any statistics? Okay, let's see. Obligation and disbursement rates. Obligation and disbursements. Infrastructure spending as percentage of GDP. Let's see. As percent of GDP. 5.8%. 18 billion. So in 2020, it went down, and 2021 went up after the pandemic. Let's see. Are they beeping over there? Rail and road transport projects and infrastructure, flagship costs, funding source, public funds. Let's see. And this might be very interesting. So please go through, like any resource, you can use this or maybe just online resource. And then next meeting will be talking about how do we write a short report. And then I think we can write the report and then check it within the meeting. So we can go over to market analysis. So just review again the reading materials and then think about what's happening in your area. And then basically we'll choose a topic next meeting lang, kay we don't have much time. Okay, so I'll stop recording here.